One warm afternoon, a little girl named Alice sat under a tree with her sister, who was reading a book filled with long, dull words. She was bored and wished for something exciting to happen, hoping for an adventure that would take her far away from her sleepy surroundings. Suddenly, a white rabbit ran past her, wearing a red coat and holding a pocket watch, its ears flopping wildly as it dashed by. "I'm late! I'm late!" the rabbit exclaimed, glancing nervously at its watch before disappearing into the bushes, as if on an urgent mission. Curious, Alice stood up and followed the rabbit, her heart beating faster with every step as she wondered where it might lead, her imagination racing with thoughts of secret tunnels and magical lands hidden just out of sight. The rabbit hopped into a large rabbit hole, its fluffy tail disappearing just as Alice crouched down to peek inside. She saw that the tunnel twisted and turned, going down so far that it looked like the entrance to a whole new world waiting to be explored. And without thinking, she jumped in too. She fell and fell, tumbling through the darkness, feeling as if she were floating slowly like a feather, surrounded by swirling objects like clocks, books, and teacups drifting lazily past her, until she landed with a soft thud in a strange underground world. Alice looked around and saw a tiny door with tall twisted plants and glowing mushrooms that lit up the dim room like little lanterns. But when she tried to open the door, it was too small for her to fit through. That's when she noticed a tiny golden key sitting on a glass table nearby, along with a small bottle labeled "Drink Me." The bottle shimmered with a mysterious turquoise liquid inside. Alice took a sip. And poof! She shrank down to the size of a doll, feeling her surroundings grow enormous as the table's leg turned into a towering pillar. The small mushrooms that had been on the ground now looked like giant umbrellas, and the twisted plants rose up like winding jungle vines, casting long shadows that made the cave feel even more magical and mysterious. Now small enough, Alice opened the door and stepped into a beautiful garden filled with colourful flowers, each petal glistening like jewels in the soft sunlight, and the air was sweet with the scent of blooming roses and fresh grass. As she wandered further in, she noticed strange creatures everywhere. Birds perched on branches, singing funny songs, and animals of all kinds chatted with each other as if it were perfectly normal, creating a lively and magical world unlike anything Alice had ever seen. Alice continued exploring until she met a grinning cat sitting on the branch of a tree. The cat's smile was wide and mysterious. "Hello, little girl," the cat said. "Where are you going?" "I'm not sure," Alice answered. "I just followed a white rabbit." The cat chuckled. "If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. But if you're curious, you could visit the Mad Hatter or the Queen of Hearts." With that, the cat slowly began to fade away, as if it were melting into thin air. The last thing Alice saw was the cat's wide, cheeky grin, floating in the air like a big smiley moon. Alice couldn't help but wonder if the cat was really gone, or just hiding nearby, waiting to surprise her again. Alice wandered until she came across a long table, where the Mad Hatter, a hare, and a sleepy mouse were having tea. They wore silly hats and told strange riddles. "Would you like some tea?" asked the Mad Hatter. "Yes, please," Alice replied. But whenever she tried to sip, they switched chairs and cups so fast it felt like everything was spinning. It was the strangest tea party, with everyone talking in funny ways, as if rules didn't matter. After a while, Alice decided it was time to leave, though the Mad Hatter and the hare kept laughing as if tea parties were always this silly. As she walked away, she could still hear their giggles echoing behind her, making her wonder if she'd ever find such a strange and funny group of friends again. Next, Alice found herself in a royal garden, where soldiers shaped like playing cards were painting white roses red. Suddenly, a loud voice shouted, "Off with their heads!" It was the Queen of Hearts, a very grumpy lady with a crown. Alice wasn't afraid though. She stood tall and gave a little bow, trying to be polite. "Who are you?" the Queen demanded, her voice sharp and serious. "I'm Alice," she replied, speaking clearly and bravely, even though the Queen's stern look made her feel a little nervous inside. The Queen decided Alice should play a game of croquet, but instead of regular balls and mallets, the Queen used hedgehogs and flamingos. The game was confusing, and the Queen got mad every time someone didn't play the way she liked. The Queen grew angrier and angrier, yelling, "Off with her head!" whenever something went wrong. Alice knew she had to be brave. "You're just a mean lady with silly rules," Alice said boldly. Everyone gasped, but Alice didn't care. She stood her ground, feeling a mix of fear and courage as the Queen's eyes widened with fury. The Queen opened her mouth to shout again, but before she could say anything else, Alice felt everything spinning around her, as if the whole world was swirling like a giant whirlpool, making her feel dizzy and light as a feather. She reached out to steady herself, but the garden seemed to melt away, fading into a swirl of colours and shapes. Suddenly, Alice found herself back under the tree where she had started, as if nothing strange had happened at all. Her sister was still reading her book quietly. Alice smiled to herself. What a curious adventure it had been. Alice wondered if it had all been a dream, but then again, she thought, maybe it wasn't. She looked around, half expecting to see the white rabbit dart by again, but everything seemed perfectly normal. And with that, Alice decided she would never stop being curious about the world, for who knew what other adventures were waiting just around the corner.